You've been told that creating quantum shifts in your life requires struggle, effort, and fighting against your current reality. But what if I told you that the very act of fighting is what's keeping you stuck in the same patterns, and that quantum transformation actually happens when you completely stop resisting and start flowing with the natural intelligence of the universe? I know this sounds counterintuitive, especially when you're surrounded by manifestation coaches telling you to hustle harder, visualize more intensely, and force your desires into existence. But here's what they're not telling you, and what the most successful people on the planet have discovered through direct experience. Quantum shifts don't happen through force. They happen through flow. They happen when you stop being the person trying to make something happen and start being the person who naturally allows it to happen. Think about this for a moment. Every single breakthrough you've ever had in your life, every moment when everything suddenly clicked into place, every time a solution appeared out of nowhere or an opportunity showed up at exactly the right moment, were you struggling when it happened? Were you grinding and forcing and pushing against reality? Or were you in a state of flow, a state of allowing, a state where you had somehow let go of the desperate need to control the outcome? The quantum field responds to your state of being, not your state of doing. And when you're fighting, when you're struggling, when you're in resistance, you're broadcasting a frequency that says, I don't have what I want, and I'm separate from it. The universe receives that signal, loud and clear, and it gives you more experiences of not having what you want and being separate from it. But when you shift into flow, something extraordinary happens at the quantum level. You begin to operate from a completely different frequency, a frequency that says, I am already whole, I am already connected to everything I desire, and I trust the natural unfolding of life. This isn't just spiritual philosophy. This is quantum mechanics in action. Let me share something with you that changed everything for me. I used to be the queen of struggle. I thought that if I wasn't working 18-hour days, if I wasn't pushing through resistance, if I wasn't fighting for what I wanted, then I wasn't worthy of having it. I had this deep programming that said, success required suffering, that ease meant I was being lazy, and that if something came too easily, it couldn't be valuable. And you know what that belief system created in my life? Exactly what it promised. Struggle, resistance, the constant feeling that I was swimming upstream against a current that seemed determined to push me backward. Even when I achieved things, they felt hollow, because I had exhausted myself getting there. Then I discovered something that the ancient wisdom traditions have known for thousands of years, and that quantum physics is now proving scientifically. We are not separate from the field of infinite possibilities. We are not isolated beings trying to manipulate a universe that's working against us. We are expressions of the same intelligence that orchestrates the movement of galaxies, that knows exactly how to turn a seed into a tree, that coordinates trillions of cells in your body without you having to consciously think about it. This intelligence is not something outside of you that you need to convince or cajole or bargain with. This intelligence is what you are. And when you align with it instead of fighting against it, when you start flowing with it instead of trying to control it, quantum shifts become as natural as breathing. Now, I can already hear some of you thinking, but if I don't fight for what I want, if I don't push and strive and work hard, won't I just become passive? Won't I end up settling for mediocrity? And I understand that fear, because I had it too. We've been conditioned to believe that effort equals worthiness, that struggle equals value, that if we're not exhausted, we're not doing enough. But here's the distinction that changes everything. There's a massive difference between inspired action and forced action. There's a world of difference between flow and passivity. When you're in flow, you're not sitting on your couch waiting for miracles to drop from the sky. You're taking action, but it's action that feels aligned, action that energizes you rather than depletes you, action that feels like a natural expression of who you're becoming rather than something you have to force yourself to do. Think about a river for a moment. A river is incredibly powerful. It can carve through mountains, it can move massive boulders, it can generate enough energy to power entire cities. But it doesn't do this through struggle. It does this through flow. It follows the path of least resistance, and in doing so, it becomes unstoppable. This is the quantum shift method. Instead of trying to force your way through the mountain of your current circumstances, you learn to flow like water. You find the natural openings, the path of least resistance, and you move through them with grace and power. And just like water eventually reaches the ocean no matter what obstacles are in its path, you reach your desires not by fighting your way there, but by flowing toward them. But here's where most people get confused about what flow actually means. They think it means being wishy-washy, going with whatever happens, having no direction or intention. That's not flow. That's drift. Flow is incredibly focused, but it's focused on being rather than doing. It's focused on embodying the frequency of what you want, rather than manipulating the circumstances to get what you want. When you're in true flow, you have absolute clarity about where you're going, but you hold that vision lightly. You're not attached to exactly how it shows up or exactly when it shows up or exactly who needs to be involved. You trust that the same intelligence that knows how to beat your heart and grow your hair and heal your cuts also knows the perfect way to bring your desires into form. And here's what's fascinating from a quantum perspective. When you stop trying to control the how and the when and the who, you actually give the universe access to infinite pathways that your limited human mind could never have conceived of. When you're in struggle mode, you're basically telling the universe, this is the only way it can happen, and it has to happen on this timeline, and these are the only people who can help me. You're collapsing infinite possibilities into a very narrow range of outcomes. But when you shift into flow, you're saying, I know what I want to experience, I can feel what it would be like to have it, and I trust you to orchestrate the perfect unfolding. Suddenly you've opened up pathways that you didn't even know existed. Opportunities start showing up from directions you never would have looked. People appear in your life who have exactly what you need. Resources become available that you didn't know were possible. This isn't magic, even though it can feel magical. This is how the quantum field actually works. At the quantum level, everything exists in a state of pure potential until it's observed and collapsed into reality. When you're in struggle, you're observing from the frequency of lack and limitation, so you keep collapsing potential into experiences of lack and limitation. When you're in flow, you're observing from the frequency of abundance and possibility, so you keep collapsing potential into experiences of abundance and possibility. Your state of being is literally determining what version of reality you experience. And the most powerful state of being you can cultivate is flow, because flow is the natural state of the universe itself. When you align with that, you're not fighting against the current of life, you're riding it. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works. A few years ago, I was trying to expand my business, but I was approaching it from pure struggle energy. I was working 16-hour days. I was stressed about money. I was trying to force partnerships that didn't feel right. I was pushing marketing strategies that felt inauthentic. And you know what happened? Nothing. Actually, worse than nothing. I was burning out. My existing clients could feel my desperation energy and started pulling back, and I was creating more problems than I was solving. Then I had what I can only describe as a quantum moment. I was sitting in my car after a particularly frustrating meeting, and I suddenly realized that I was trying to build my business the same way I had learned to live my life, through force and control, and the belief that I had to make everything happen through sheer willpower. And in that moment, I made a decision to try something completely different. I decided to stop fighting and start flowing. The first thing I did was get clear on what I actually wanted to experience in my business. Not what I thought I should want, not what would look impressive to other people, but what would actually feel aligned and joyful for me. Then, instead of making a detailed plan and trying to force it into existence, I simply started taking actions that felt good, actions that energized me rather than depleted me. I stopped pushing partnerships and started focusing on creating value for the clients I already had. I stopped trying to be everywhere at once and started showing up authentically in the places that felt right. I stopped worrying about what my competitors were doing and started trusting my own inner guidance about what wanted to emerge through me. And here's what happened. Within 3 months, my business had doubled. But more importantly, it had doubled in a way that felt sustainable and joyful. The right people started showing up at exactly the right time. Opportunities appeared that I never could have planned for. Resources became available that I didn't even know I needed. The shift wasn't in what I was doing. The shift was in how I was being while I was doing it. I had moved from struggle to flow, and everything changed. Now, I want to address something that might be coming up for you right now. You might be thinking, this sounds great in theory, but I have real problems that need real solutions. I can't just flow my way out of debt or flow my way into a better relationship or flow my way to better health. And I hear you. I'm not suggesting that you ignore practical reality or that you can just think your way out of challenging circumstances. What I'm suggesting is that there are 2 ways to approach any challenge. You can approach it from struggle, which means you're operating from the belief that you're separate from what you want. and you have to force it to happen through willpower and effort. Or you can approach it from flow, which means you're operating from the knowing that you're connected to infinite intelligence and you can allow solutions to emerge through you. When you're dealing with debt, for example, struggle energy looks like panic, desperation, trying to control every penny, working yourself to exhaustion, and constantly focusing on what you don't have. Flow energy looks like getting calm and clear, asking for guidance about the next right action, taking inspired steps that feel aligned, trusting that solutions exist even if you can't see them yet, and focusing on abundance rather than scarcity. Both approaches involve taking action, but the quality of the action is completely different. Struggle action is frantic and forced. Flow action is calm and powerful. And the results are completely different too. Struggle action tends to create more of the same problems you're trying to solve. Flow action tends to create breakthrough solutions that address the root cause, not just the symptoms. Here's what I've discovered about the quantum mechanics of this. When you're in struggle, your nervous system is in a state of fight or flight. Your brain is literally wired for survival, which means it can only see a very narrow range of options, usually the same options you've already tried. Your creativity is shut down, your intuition is offline, and you're operating from a very limited perspective. But when you shift into flow, your nervous system relaxes into a state of coherence. Your brain waves literally change. You gain access to parts of your consciousness that are normally dormant. Your intuition comes online. Your creativity expands. You start seeing possibilities that were invisible to you when you were in struggle mode. This isn't just metaphysical theory. This is measurable neuroscience. When you're in flow states, your brain produces different chemicals, your heart rhythm becomes coherent, and you literally become a different person with access to different capabilities and different perceptions. And here's the quantum part. When your internal state changes, your external reality begins to reorganize itself to match your new frequency. It's not that you're manipulating reality through positive thinking. It's that you're aligning with a different layer of reality that was always there but wasn't accessible to you when you were in struggle mode. Think about it this way. Imagine that reality is like a radio with infinite stations. When you're in struggle, you're tuned to the struggle station, so that's all you can hear. All the solutions, all the opportunities, all the resources that exist on other stations are still broadcasting, but you can't access them because you're not tuned to their frequency. When you shift into flow, it's like tuning to a completely different station. Suddenly you can hear music that was always playing but was inaudible to you before. You can access information and opportunities and connections that were always available but weren't in your range when you were tuned to struggle. This is why people who learn to operate from flow often say that their lives became magical. It's not that the laws of physics stopped working. It's that they gained access to laws of physics that they didn't know existed when they were operating from limitation. But here's the thing about shifting from struggle to flow. It's not just a mental decision. You can't just think your way into flow. You have to embody it. You have to literally rewire your nervous system to recognize flow as safe and struggle as unnecessary. Most of us have been conditioned from childhood to believe that struggle equals safety. We learned that if we work hard enough, if we worry enough, if we control enough, we can prevent bad things from happening. We developed an addiction to struggle because struggle felt like action, and action felt like protection. But what if I told you that struggle is actually the least safe way to live? What if I told you that when you're in struggle, you're operating from such a limited perspective that you're actually creating more problems than you're solving? What if I told you that flow is not only more effective but also infinitely safer because you're aligned with the intelligence that's orchestrating the entire universe? This is where the quantum shift method becomes practical. It's not just about understanding these concepts intellectually. It's about training your body and your nervous system to recognize flow as your natural state and to automatically return to flow whenever you notice yourself slipping into struggle. So how do you actually make this shift? How do you move from being someone who struggles to being someone who flows? How do you retrain a lifetime of conditioning that says effort equals worthiness and ease equals laziness? The first step is learning to recognize the difference between struggle energy and flow energy in your own body. Struggle energy feels tight, constricted, urgent, and depleting. Flow energy feels expansive, easeful, powerful, and energizing. Most people are so used to struggle that they think it's normal. They don't even realize there's another way to operate. Start paying attention to how different activities feel in your body. When you're doing something that's aligned, something that's in flow, notice how your body responds. You might feel energized even if you're working hard. You might lose track of time. You might feel like you're being carried by something larger than yourself. When you're doing something that's out of alignment, something that requires struggle, notice how that feels too. You might feel drained even if the task is simple. You might feel resistant or heavy. You might feel like you're pushing against an invisible wall. This body awareness is crucial because your body is actually a more accurate guidance system than your mind when it comes to recognizing flow. Your mind has been programmed with all kinds of beliefs about what you should do and how you should do it. But your body knows the difference between alignment and misalignment, between flow and resistance, between what's truly serving you and what's just familiar. The second step is learning to trust flow even when it doesn't make logical sense. This is probably the hardest part for most people because we've been trained to believe that logic and planning and control are the keys to success. But flow operates from a different kind of intelligence, an intelligence that can see patterns and connections and possibilities that your logical mind could never compute. Sometimes flow will guide you to take actions that seem completely unrelated to your goals. Sometimes it will guide you to rest when you think you should be working. Sometimes it will guide you to say no to opportunities that look good on paper, but don't feel right in your body. Learning to trust these impulses even when they don't make sense to your mind is how you begin to align with the quantum intelligence that knows exactly how to orchestrate your desires into form. Let me share an example of what this looks like in practice. Last year, I was working on launching a new program, and my logical mind had a very clear plan about how it should unfold. I had mapped out the marketing strategy, the launch timeline, the content calendar, everything. But every time I sat down to execute the plan, I felt heavy and resistant. It felt like I was trying to push a boulder uphill. Instead of forcing myself to follow the plan, I decided to trust the flow. I put the launch on hold and instead focused on some creative projects that had been calling to me, but that seemed completely unrelated to my business goals. I wrote some articles that I never intended to publish. I had conversations with people who weren't potential clients. I took a workshop that had nothing to do with my industry. From a logical perspective, this looked like procrastination or self-sabotage. But I had learned to trust flow even when it doesn't make sense. And here's what happened. Through one of those seemingly unrelated conversations, I met someone who introduced me to someone else who became a key collaborator on a project that was infinitely more aligned and successful than what I had originally planned. The creative work I did during that time became the foundation for a completely different offering that felt much more authentic to who I was becoming. The workshop I took gave me insights that transformed how I approached my entire business. None of this could have happened if I had forced myself to stick to my original plan. It only happened because I trusted flow over logic, alignment over strategy, inner guidance over external expectations. This is what I mean when I say that quantum shifts happen when you stop fighting and start flowing. You're not abandoning goals or becoming passive. You're learning to dance with life instead of wrestling with it. You're learning to receive guidance from a source of intelligence that's far more sophisticated than your individual mind could ever be. But here's where people often get stuck. They start to understand the concept of flow intellectually, but they don't know how to access it practically. They've spent so many years in struggle mode that flow feels foreign, even uncomfortable. They worry that if they're not pushing and striving and controlling, they'll lose their edge, they'll become complacent, they'll stop achieving things. I want to address this fear directly because it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what flow actually is. Flow is not the absence of power. Flow is power in its most refined form. Think about a master martial artist. They're not using brute force to overcome their opponent. They're using precision, timing, and alignment to redirect energy in the most efficient way possible. They accomplish more with less effort because they understand how to work with natural forces instead of against them. This is exactly what happens when you learn to operate from flow in your daily life. You don't become less effective. You become more effective. You don't achieve less, you achieve more, but with greater ease and sustainability. You don't lose your ambition. You refine your ambition so that it's aligned with your authentic desires rather than driven by fear or external pressure. The quantum field responds to authenticity. It responds to alignment. It responds to the frequency of who you truly are, not who you think you should be or who you're trying to become to impress other people. When you're flowing, you're operating from your authentic frequency, and that's when the magic happens. Let me explain this from a quantum physics perspective. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every belief you hold is literally broadcasting a frequency into the field of infinite possibilities. This isn't metaphorical. This is measurable electromagnetic energy. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field that's 60 times greater than your brain, and this field extends several feet beyond your physical body. When you're in struggle, you're broadcasting the frequency of separation, lack, and resistance. The quantum field receives this signal and responds by collapsing possibilities that match that frequency. You attract more experiences of struggle, more reasons to feel separate, more evidence that you have to fight for what you want. When you're in flow, you're broadcasting the frequency of connection, abundance, and allowance. The quantum field receives this signal and responds by collapsing possibilities that match this frequency. You attract experiences of ease, synchronicity, and natural abundance. You find yourself in the right place at the right time with the right people, having the right conversations that lead to the right opportunities. This isn't wishful thinking or spiritual bypassing. This is how energy works at the most fundamental level of reality. Everything is energy. Everything is vibration. And like frequencies attract like frequencies. When you change your internal frequency by shifting from struggle to flow, you literally change what you're attracting into your experience. But here's the sophisticated part that most manifestation teachings miss. You can't fake flow. You can't pretend to be in flow while secretly being in struggle and expect it to work. The quantum field responds to your actual frequency, not the frequency you're trying to project. This is why affirmations and visualization often don't work for people. They're trying to broadcast abundance while feeling scarcity, trying to broadcast confidence while feeling fear, trying to broadcast flow while being in struggle. The quantum shift method is different because it's not about trying to project a different frequency. It's about actually becoming a different frequency. It's about literally rewiring your nervous system so that flow becomes your default state rather than something you have to work to access. And this rewiring happens through embodiment, not through mental techniques. Your body is where your frequency lives. Your body is where your beliefs are stored. Your body is where the transformation has to happen if you want it to be real and lasting. Most people try to change their lives by changing their thoughts, but thoughts are just the surface level of consciousness. Underneath your thoughts are your emotions. Underneath your emotions are your beliefs. Underneath your beliefs are your nervous system patterns. And underneath your nervous system patterns is your fundamental sense of safety or unsafety in the world. If you don't feel fundamentally safe to flow, if you don't feel safe to trust, if you don't feel safe to let go of control, then no amount of positive thinking or visualization is going to create lasting change. You'll keep reverting back to struggle, because struggle feels safer to your nervous system, even though it's actually creating more of the problems you're trying to solve. This is why the quantum shift method focuses so much on nervous system regulation and embodiment practices. Before you can consistently access flow states, you have to convince your body that flow is safe. You have to give your nervous system new evidence that you can trust life, that you can let go of control, that you can allow things to unfold without having to micromanage every detail. One of the most powerful practices I've discovered for this is what I call quantum breathing. It's a specific breathing pattern that activates your parasympathetic nervous system and shifts your brain waves into a coherent state where flow becomes accessible. When you breathe in a slow, rhythmic pattern, focusing on making your exhale longer than your inhale, you're literally telling your nervous system that you're safe, that there's no emergency, that you can relax into trust. But it's not just about the breathing technique itself. It's about what you're cultivating while you're breathing. As you slow down your breath, you're also slowing down your thoughts. As you relax your body, you're also releasing the need to control. As you soften into the present moment, you're also opening to the possibility that life is actually working for you, not against you. This might sound simple, but simplicity is actually the hallmark of quantum principles. The most profound truths are often the simplest ones. The challenge is not in understanding them intellectually, but in integrating them so deeply that they become your lived experience. I remember working with a client who was struggling to grow her coaching business. She had all the right strategies, all the right training, all the right credentials, but nothing was working. She was working 18-hour days. She was constantly stressed about money, and she was starting to question whether she was cut out for entrepreneurship. When we started working together, the first thing I noticed was that she was operating from pure struggle energy. She was trying to force clients to work with her. She was pushing marketing strategies that felt inauthentic. She was constantly comparing herself to other coaches and feeling like she wasn't doing enough. Instead of giving her more strategies or techniques, I introduced her to the quantum shift method. We started with nervous system work, helping her body remember what safety felt like. We practiced quantum breathing until flow states became familiar to her. We worked on embodying the frequency of someone who naturally attracts aligned clients, rather than someone who has to chase them. The transformation was remarkable, but it didn't happen overnight. For the first few weeks, her mind kept trying to pull her back into struggle mode. She would catch herself checking her phone obsessively, working late into the night, and worrying about things that were completely outside of her control. But gradually, as she continued to practice flowing instead of fighting, everything began to shift. She started taking inspired action instead of forced action. She began showing up authentically instead of trying to be what she thought people wanted. She focused on serving her existing clients at the highest level instead of constantly trying to find new ones. And here's what happened. Within 2 months, her business had completely transformed. Not because she was working harder, but because she was working from flow instead of struggle. She attracted 3 high-level clients who found her through referrals she never could have planned. She was invited to speak at an event that led to multiple new opportunities. She started earning more money while working fewer hours and feeling more aligned with her purpose. The shift wasn't in her external strategies. The shift was in her internal frequency. She had learned to embody flow, and her external reality reorganized itself to match her new way of being. This is what I mean when I say that quantum shifts happen when you stop fighting and start flowing. You're not changing what you're doing as much as you're changing how you're being while you're doing it. And that shift in being creates a cascade of changes in your external experience that can seem almost miraculous from the outside. But from the inside, from the perspective of quantum mechanics, it makes perfect sense. You've aligned with the natural intelligence of the universe, and that intelligence knows exactly how to orchestrate the perfect unfolding of your desires. You've stopped interfering with that process through struggle and resistance, and you've started collaborating with it through flow and trust. Now, I want to talk about what this looks like in different areas of your life, because flow isn't just a business principle or a manifestation technique. It's a way of living that can transform every aspect of your experience. In relationships, for example, most people approach love from struggle energy. They're trying to find the right person, trying to make relationships work, trying to change their partner, or trying to change themselves to be more lovable. They're operating from the belief that love is scarce, that they have to compete for it, that they have to earn it through being perfect or through sacrificing their own needs. But when you approach relationships from flow energy, everything changes. Instead of trying to find love, you focus on becoming love. Instead of trying to get your needs met, you focus on meeting your own needs so completely that you're overflowing with love to share. Instead of trying to control how relationships unfold, you trust that the right people will be drawn to your authentic frequency, and the wrong people will naturally fall away. This doesn't mean you become passive in relationships. It means you become authentic. It means you stop trying to be what you think other people want, and start being who you actually are. It means you communicate your truth with kindness, but without apology. It means you set boundaries not from anger, but from self-love. When you embody this frequency, you attract relationships that are based on genuine compatibility rather than mutual neediness. You attract people who love you for who you are rather than who you're pretending to be. You create connections that energize you rather than drain you. The same principle applies to health and healing. Most people approach health from struggle energy. They're fighting disease, battling symptoms, trying to force their body to be different than it is. They're operating from fear and resistance, which actually creates more stress in the system and can interfere with the body's natural healing mechanisms. When you approach health from flow energy, you work with your body's innate intelligence rather than against it. You listen to what your body needs rather than forcing it to comply with external rules. You address the emotional and energetic roots of physical symptoms rather than just trying to suppress the symptoms themselves. This doesn't mean you ignore medical advice or avoid necessary treatments. It means you approach healing as a collaboration between your conscious mind, your body's wisdom, and whatever medical support is appropriate. You trust that your body knows how to heal, and you create the conditions that support that natural process. I've seen people experience remarkable healings when they shift from fighting their illness to flowing with their body's healing intelligence, not because they ignored their symptoms or avoided medical care, but because they stopped adding the stress of resistance to whatever their body was already dealing with. The same principle applies to money and abundance. Most people approach wealth from struggle energy. They're working harder and harder, trying to force money to come to them, operating from scarcity and fear about never having enough. They're so focused on what they don't have that they can't see the abundance that's already present in their lives. When you approach money from flow energy, you focus on creating value rather than extracting money. You trust that when you're aligned with your purpose and serving from your gifts, the money will follow naturally. You operate from abundance consciousness rather than scarcity consciousness. This doesn't mean you ignore practical financial management or that money just appears without any action on your part. It means you take inspired action rather than desperate action. It means you make financial decisions from wisdom rather than fear. It means you focus on circulation rather than accumulation, understanding that money is energy, and energy needs to flow to grow. People who master this approach often find that money starts showing up in unexpected ways. They receive opportunities they never could have planned for. They find themselves in the right place at the right time for financial breakthroughs. They discover that their authentic gifts are more valuable than they ever imagined. But here's what's crucial to understand about all of this. The quantum shift from struggle to flow isn't something you do once and then you're done. It's an ongoing practice, a continuous choice, a moment-by-moment decision to align with flow rather than revert to struggle. Your mind has been conditioned for years or decades to default to struggle mode. Your nervous system has learned to interpret struggle as safety and flow as danger. These patterns don't disappear overnight just because you intellectually understand that there's a better way. The transformation happens through repetition, through consistently choosing flow over struggle, through rewiring your nervous system one breath at a time, one choice at a time, one moment at a time. Every time you catch yourself slipping into struggle and consciously shift back to flow, you're strengthening new neural pathways. You're teaching your body that flow is safe. You're proving to yourself that there really is another way to live. And here's the beautiful thing about this process. The more you practice flowing instead of fighting, the easier it becomes. What initially requires conscious effort eventually becomes automatic. Flow starts to feel more natural than struggle. Trust starts to feel safer than control. Ease starts to feel more normal than stress. You begin to recognize struggle energy the moment it arises, and you have the tools to shift back to flow before it takes over your entire experience. You develop what I call quantum resilience, the ability to stay aligned with flow even when challenging circumstances arise. This is when life becomes truly magical, not because you never face difficulties, but because you approach difficulties from such a different frequency that solutions appear more quickly, support shows up more readily, and you navigate challenges with grace rather than getting knocked off balance by them. You start to see that every challenge is actually an invitation to deepen your trust, to strengthen your flow, to discover new levels of your own power and wisdom. Instead of seeing problems as evidence that life is working against you, you start to see them as opportunities for growth and expansion. This shift in perspective is itself a quantum leap. When you stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as a conscious collaborator with life, everything changes. You reclaim your power, not through force and control, but through alignment and flow. And this is where the quantum shift method becomes not just a technique for manifesting what you want, but a way of being that transforms you at the deepest level. You're not just getting better results in your external life. You're becoming a fundamentally different person, someone who operates from trust rather than fear, from abundance rather than scarcity, from flow rather than struggle. This transformation ripples out into every area of your life and every relationship you have. People start to notice something different about you. They can feel your calm presence, your natural confidence, your ability to remain centered even in chaotic situations. You become a source of peace and inspiration for others without even trying. But perhaps most importantly, you finally come home to yourself. You stop trying to be someone you're not in order to get what you want. You discover that who you already are is not only enough, but is actually the key to everything you've been seeking. You realize that the struggle was never necessary, that flow was always available, that you always had access to the quantum intelligence that knows exactly how to create the life you desire. This is the ultimate quantum shift, the recognition that you are not separate from the creative force of the universe. You are an expression of it. You are a unique and irreplaceable note in the symphony of existence, and when you stop fighting against your own nature and start flowing with it, you discover that creating the life you want is not only possible, it's inevitable. The question is not whether you have the power to transform your life. The question is whether you're willing to stop struggling long enough to discover the flow that's been waiting for you all along. The question is not whether you have the power to transform your life. The question is whether you're willing to stop struggling long enough to discover the flow that's been waiting for you all along. I want to leave you with something that might challenge everything you've been taught about success, achievement, and worthiness. What if I told you that the very thing you've been using to try to create the life you want, struggle, is the one thing that's been keeping you from having it? What if the effort you've been putting into forcing outcomes has been the exact energy that's been pushing those outcomes away from you? This isn't about becoming lazy or passive. This isn't about giving up on your dreams or settling for mediocrity. This is about discovering that there's a way to achieve everything you want and more, but from a completely different frequency. It's about learning that the universe is not working against you, requiring you to fight for every good thing that comes into your life. The universe is actually conspiring in your favor, waiting for you to align with its natural flow so it can deliver experiences beyond what your struggling mind could ever have imagined. Right now, as you're listening to these words, you have a choice. You can go back to the old way of doing things, the way you were taught, the way that feels familiar even though it's exhausting. You can continue to believe that struggle equals worthiness, that ease means you're not trying hard enough, that if something comes too easily it can't be valuable. Or you can make a quantum shift right here, right now. You can decide that you're ready to try a different way. You can choose to trust that there's an intelligence greater than your individual mind that knows exactly how to orchestrate your desires into form. You can begin to flow instead of fight, to allow instead of force, to trust instead of control. And if you're feeling even the slightest resonance with what I'm sharing, if there's a part of you that recognizes this truth even though your mind might be arguing with it, then you're already beginning the shift. That recognition, that spark of knowing, that's your quantum self waking up. That's the part of you that remembers how to flow, even if you've forgotten how to access it consistently. The path forward is simpler than you think, but it requires courage. Not the courage to fight harder or push through more resistance, but the courage to let go, the courage to trust, the courage to stop doing what you've always done and start being who you've always been underneath all the conditioning and programming and beliefs about how life is supposed to work. Start with your breath. Right now, take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, let go of the need to have everything figured out. Let go of the timeline you've created for when things should happen. Let go of the specific way you think your desires have to unfold. Just for this moment, surrender to the possibility that life knows what it's doing, even when you don't. Feel the relief in that surrender. Feel how much energy you've been using to try to control outcomes that were never yours to control in the first place. Feel how exhausting it's been to carry the weight of making everything happen through your own willpower. And feel the space that opens up when you set that burden down. In that space, in that openness, in that flow, lies everything you've been looking for. Not because you're going to think your way to it or force your way to it, but because you're going to allow yourself to become the frequency that naturally attracts it. You're going to embody the energy of someone who already has what they desire, not as a manifestation technique, but as a return to your natural state. This is who you really are underneath all the struggle. This is your quantum self, the part of you that's connected to infinite intelligence, infinite creativity, infinite possibility. This is the part of you that doesn't have to fight for what you want, because it knows that what you want is already seeking you. The quantum shift method isn't something you do. It's something you remember. It's a return to the natural way of being that you knew before the world taught you that life was hard, that you had to earn your worth, that struggle was the price of success. You came into this world in perfect flow. Watch a baby breathe, and you'll see quantum breathing in action. Watch a child play, and you'll see flow state embodied. Watch how nature unfolds, how flowers bloom, how rivers find their way to the ocean, and you'll see the quantum shift method in its purest form. You already know how to do this. You've just forgotten. And the forgetting happened gradually, through years of conditioning that taught you to override your natural instincts, to ignore your inner guidance, to trust external authorities more than your own wisdom. But remembering can happen in an instant. It can happen right now. It happens the moment you decide to stop fighting and start flowing. It happens when you choose trust over control, ease over struggle, alignment over force. And here's what I want you to know as you begin this journey back to your natural state. You don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to master it overnight. You don't have to never struggle again in order for this to work. Every moment that you choose flow over struggle, you're creating a quantum shift. Every breath that you take from trust instead of fear is rewiring your nervous system. Every action that you take from inspiration instead of desperation is aligning you with the natural intelligence of the universe. The path is not about perfection. The path is about practice. And the practice is about returning again and again to the knowing that you are not separate from the creative force of life. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are not at the mercy of external conditions. You are a conscious collaborator with the quantum field, and when you align with its natural flow, miracles become your normal experience. So here's my invitation to you. For the next 24 hours, experiment with flow. When you notice yourself slipping into struggle energy, pause and take 3 deep breaths. Ask yourself, how would I approach this situation if I trusted that life was working for me instead of against me? Then take action from that place of trust. Even if it feels unfamiliar, pay attention to what happens. Notice how differently your body feels when you're flowing instead of fighting. Notice how much more creative you become when you're not forcing solutions. Notice how opportunities start to appear when you stop trying to control every outcome. And if you're ready to go deeper, if you're ready to make this shift not just a temporary experiment but a permanent transformation, then I want you to know that you're not alone in this journey. There's a community of people who are discovering that there's another way to live, another way to create, another way to be in the world. If this message has touched something deep inside you, if you feel called to explore what your life could look like when you stop fighting and start flowing, then drop one word in the comments that captures what you're feeling right now. Let's create a field of flow together. Let's support each other in remembering who we really are underneath all the struggle. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to this channel because this is just the beginning. We're going to dive deeper into the practical applications of quantum flow, explore specific techniques for nervous system regulation, and share real stories of transformation from people who have made this shift from struggle to flow. Remember, you are not broken and you don't need to be fixed. You are not lacking and you don't need to earn your worth. You are already whole, already connected, already worthy of everything you desire. The quantum shift happens when you stop trying to become someone different and start being who you already are. The flow is waiting for you. It's been waiting your whole life. All you have to do is stop fighting long enough to feel it, trust it, and let it carry you home to yourself. Your quantum life is not some distant possibility. It's available right now, in this moment, with your next breath, with your next choice to flow instead of fight. The shift is not coming. The shift is here. The only question is, are you ready to receive it?